I'm Becky McCoy, and you're listening to Stories of Unfolding Grace, the podcast about grace during unexpected times. You'll hear from real people dealing with hard stuff, and I hope you'll feel encouraged that you can bravely live through hard stuff too. Today I'm talking with Laura Fleetwood of seekingthestill.com. Laura used to be able to do everything without asking for help at all until she had a breakdown, and she's talking about how anxiety and depression has changed the way that she approaches life. I was really encouraged, and I know you will be too. I'm here with Laura Fleetwood of seekingthestill.com. And Laura, why don't you share with us a little bit about this particularly difficult season?
Okay, well, I was in my mid-30s and had been staying home with my kids and then recently gone back to work. And it was a time just of a lot of busyness and stress. And, I think sometimes our struggles hit us all at once, and sometimes they're more like tiny pebbles falling down a mountain, and each little pebble, is its own thing, and they're so small that you don't really notice them until one or more of them kind of builds up steam, starts getting bigger, and then suddenly you find yourself in a landslide. And that's what happened to me. I was chairing a very large fundraiser for our school, and it was a perfect storm of events. My husband was traveling 3 weeks at a time internationally, and I was just under a lot of stress. And I never realized before what stress can do to you. I've always been a high achiever and a perfectionist and all of that, and been able to deal with stress pretty well. But I think all those things together just kind of put me over the edge. And our bodies are very smart. God designed us kind of with this internal alarm system. And so my body started sending SOS signals, like, hey, something's wrong, blank, blank. Take a look at what you're doing. And I didn't take time to stop and recognize them and value them and explore them. And so I just kind of had that mentality of we're just going to push through. That's kind of how I was raised. And so the SOS signals were things like I had trouble sleeping. I wasn't able to sleep through the night or fall asleep. I was nauseous a lot of the time. I was starting to shake really badly and just symptoms of stress. But in the moment, I just knew all of these things that I had on my to-do list that I had to get through. And finally, it led really to an emotional and physical breakdown.
I actually saw something on Facebook this morning, that made me think of you and your story. And it was this, just a picture someone took of a notepad, and they wrote good hustle versus bad hustle. And and so it says, like, good hustle is, if something should exist, then build it. If you want to learn something, figure it out. If you failed, no big deal. Like, just learn and find new opportunities. And then bad hustle is sleeplessness is a badge of honor. Putting your health and your wellness on hold, putting your friends and your family on hold, making a deadline a bully, or saying you had to as opposed to you want to, sacrificing things you enjoy, things like that. So that to me is like a huge symbol of your story, and that you were so focused on being this like picture perfect person who could achieve everything.
Wow. Yes, that is very, very powerful and very true. And that's something that I really struggled with. After this happened, I went through a season of doing a lot of therapy and a lot of reading about anxiety because I never knew that I had anxiety before. But I realized that I had. It's just that my coping mechanism for anxiety was to achieve things and to look perfect and to control. And so when all of that fell away and it didn't work for me anymore, I had to grieve the old Laura, and then I had to surrender and really trust God to show me who the new one was. And I struggled with that in therapy. I remember asking my therapist, what do you mean I'm not in control? Like, I make these decisions. I decide if I want to work hard on this project. I choose whether or not to take the job. And then she said something to me that I'll never forget. She said, you have the control to do the next right thing, but you have to trust God with the outcome. And that was huge for me. It was like, okay, I can wrap my mind around that. I make these decisions every day about what to do and what to think, but I don't have control of the final outcome. That is something that only God has. And that was like this freeing revelation to me that I can say, okay, God, you are in control about what ultimately happens. I just have to be obedient in my day-to-day and trust that your plan will be fulfilled.
And it sounds so simple when you say it out loud, but like that's honestly the lesson. Like that's what I'm walking through right now personally, is knowing that I can make like really good decisions and I can do all this and be really responsible, but I need to let go of that outcome and stop trying to control the outcome because I can trust God for it. And that is so hard. It's so hard.
It is, especially when you are an achiever person like I'm sure you are, because I've seen, what you've just done recently, and that's a lot of work. And so you kind of pour yourself into these callings that is a calling from God, but we tend to make up what our vision of the result is. And sometimes I think, gosh, if we trust that outcome to God, it can be so much better than what we can even dream up.
Yeah,
but we have to let go of it.
Yep.
Yeah, we have to let go of it in order for him to do that work. Otherwise, he doesn't have the space in our life to do that. And so I get it with you. It's hard. That was the hardest thing I struggled with through that season, was the process of surrender and what that means in a world where we can Google the answer for everything.
Right.
We are not taught to surrender.
Yeah, it's so easy to be in control, or try to be at least.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's rewarded a lot of times. So I think it's just a daily process of laying down ourselves and just trusting God, but yet not being lazy and not neglecting the gifts that he's given us.
Right. There is a good hustle. It's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us a little bit more about, you said you had this emotional and physical breakdown. How did that happen? What did that look like? And how did you react emotionally?
Okay, well, this is hard. Those SOS symptoms that I was talking about, those were very physical symptoms of anxiety. And my season of anxiety was very physical. The day of the event that I was planning and in charge of, I got to the country club and I sat in a chair and I literally could not move. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was experiencing a panic attack. I'd never experienced panic attacks before, but all the team was hustling around doing everything, and I just couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was going to die. I didn't know yet what all of these symptoms meant, and my body got stuck in that kind of fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
So, like when you have a big scare or you narrowly escape an accident or something, you get this surge of adrenaline in your body, which is meant for good. It's meant so that you can react and respond. But through this stressful time, my body had forgotten how to shut off that adrenaline and that cortisol rush. And so I just was physically unable to relax, physically unable to sleep without medication.
Yeah,
I just couldn't relax.
I remember when I first went to counseling after I was diagnosed with anxiety, And my counselor described panic attacks in the best way I've ever heard. And it's that we all have this natural fight or flight response, like you said. But when you have anxiety or a panic attack disorder, your body mixes up what's worth fighting or flighting from. So you get these like spikes of adrenaline over things that are not emergencies. And so it sounds like that's exactly what happened to you. You got to this fundraiser, which on its own might be a little stressful, but not like, you know, totally debilitating because you can handle a lot of stress, but all of a sudden your body was just done and shut down.
Yeah. And then exactly what you mentioned started happening. You know, I thought after the fundraiser I would kind of regroup and, you know, get some rest. And that didn't happen because I was now fearful of the fear of the symptoms. And so when I would get a racing heart or whatever, then you go, oh my gosh, I'm going to have another panic attack, which causes more adrenaline. And then, you know, it's stuck. And I remember my husband saying, Laura, what are you afraid of? And I would just cry and I would say, I don't know, and everything. Like, you know, my mind would just race and come up with these awful scenarios. And it was very, very scary for someone who has always been in control or thought that she was in control. To suddenly not have control of my own body was really, really scary. And so one day, after I hadn't slept for 3 nights, my husband said, okay, you really need more help. And so I kissed my girls goodbye, and he drove me on a sunny summer morning as everyone else was going to work to a mental hospital to get an evaluation, which for me was so, at the time, like I just felt devastated because I never thought that I would need something like that, you know, to walk into a mental hospital and say, I can't do this anymore. And so part of my calling now is that I just want to give people insight into the resources that are available when you struggle with anxiety and depression, because I think there's this kind of stigma, or just people don't know. I didn't know. Like when I stepped foot into this place, what are they going to do? Are they going to bind my hands and are they going to take me away? You know, I didn't know, and I got so much help, and the people were so wonderful through that process. They did not admit me, but you know, I was evaluated and diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, and so I went through intensive therapy, and I just would kind of like to let people know that it's okay. That I think that the people who go get help, the people who walk into a place like that and say, I need help, they are the bravest people in the world.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
They, you know, they're reaching out, and there are resources available. Not as many as I think we need, but they are there. And sometimes you just need to know that. And since that experience, I've actually been able to walk 2 different people in my life kind of through that process and recognize when, you know, they needed to take that extra step. And so that's been a huge just sign of redemption for my story, that God is able to use that dark time to now allow me to be part of other people's lives who are going through a similar season.
Yeah. So while you were going through therapy and counseling, what did you struggle with most?
I struggled with taking off my mask, you know, because I had always had this beautiful, lovely mask that everybody saw on the outside. And I never even knew that I had all this junk on the inside. Until I was faced with it, until literally a therapist said, you know, write down what's on the outside of your mask and write down what's on the inside of your mask. And when I took that mask off and I saw that I had a lot of shame, and I've had a lot of fear of failure, and I had just all this stuff on the inside, I kind of felt, because I work at a church, I'm the director of communications at a church, and so I think there's kind of this standard that you feel like you have to live up to. And so I really had to come face to face with my humanity, with my sinfulness, with my with my need for God in a way that I never had before, which has turned out to be a very beautiful thing, but was a very painful process to go through. Like I said, it was almost like I had to grieve the old Laura, like she had died and gone away.
Yeah.
And so
have you read,
what did that mean?
Have you read Emily Freeman's book, Grace for the Good Girl?
I have. That is one of my favorite books. Yes. Yeah. And that's exactly what she talks about in there, the mask.
Right. So if anybody listening wants to know more about this idea of like having a mask and portraying one version of yourself and living another, even if you think you're not living like that, read this book because we all live that way and we just don't realize it. And Emily has such a beautiful way of like helping you come to terms with that. Yeah.
So I agree.
So good.
And I think, that book is so great because so often we see people, dealing with their masks like through drugs or alcohol or eating or very negative, what the world would perceive as very negative coping mechanisms for trying to keep that internal shame and guilt and all of that hidden. But a lot of times, she calls it the good girl, a lot of times we are also doing that with good things like achieving and like trying to be perfect. And so the world sees that and goes, go Laura, you did a great job. Here's more for you. And so it becomes, it's very different because it's this good thing and this bad thing all at the same time.
Yes.
And so her book, Grace for the Good Girl, does a great job of helping you understand that and seeing that, you can do all of that, but it's where your heart is that matters. And the reason behind all of that good stuff is the important part, the intention.
Choosing to live bravely and authentically is important to me, and I'm guessing it's something you are interested in too. You can learn more about my story at my blog, BeckyLMcCoy.com. Stop by and sign up to receive my monthly newsletter. It includes all sorts of interesting tidbits and family updates. Check the show notes for details. Hey, I'd love your help with something. If you're enjoying Stories of Unfolding Grace, please share it with your friends and subscribe in iTunes. If you leave a rating, it'll help other listeners to find the podcast. Thanks so much for being on this journey with me. I'm using this definition of grace as ways that good things happen during really difficult times. So how would you say that you saw grace both through that season of way too much stress and panic attacks and all that, and also through your time of healing and going to therapy?
Oh, my goodness. In so many ways. And through the darkest times, grace was literally me holding out my hand, would hold my hand outstretched the entire day and just imagine Jesus, holding my hand and getting me through. Because I would get out of bed after having no sleep the night before and think, I can't even make it through this day. And literally that was what got me through, is knowing that Jesus was right there beside me. And grace was also, oh my gosh, the amazing people that he put in my life through this process. Friends, who would text me and sit in my car with me during a panic attack at work, and my parents who came to live with us and literally were the mother and father to my kids when my husband was traveling and I was, basically out of commission.
Yeah.
So many people, so many prayers, and you realize through that God works through people. That is how he works. And so now, I look at it, and when I get that little Holy Spirit tap on my shoulder, like someone pops in my head, and I think, oh, I wonder how they're doing, I try to react immediately and send them the text or send them the email or stop them in the hallway and say, because I know that that's how he worked in my life. He nudged people to reach out to me and really helped me reach out in return, because I had never had to ask for help before. ever.
Yeah.
And it was so hard for me to do that. But through God's grace, he showed me that relationships matter with other people and with him. And, there's no way now that if someone came to me and they were like, gosh, tell me, why do you believe that God exists? And I would say, because he got me through the darkest time of my life. And I know that it was him, because the ways he showed up were miraculous. They were small, but they were miraculous. And he's just so good. He's so good to us. And gosh, now, I feel like now I'm at a point where it's like, okay, now what? Because I never thought that my calling would be to talk about anxiety or a nervous breakdown. That was not part of my picture.
Yeah. So why don't you describe for a little bit, describe for a minute some of like the symptoms that you experience with anxiety, whether it's the things that you experience or that other people experience as well. Because we all, anxiety isn't really this easy to label thing.
Exactly.
And depression as well. Just so that if someone is wondering if that's what they're struggling with, maybe you can help point them towards a way to get help and recognize
Sure.
that.
Oh, I would love to do that. So anxiety can show up in many ways, different ways. It depends on the person, but some common things are, if you notice that you're holding your breath a lot, like you feel like you can't breathe, or your heart starts racing, or you start sweating when you think about something that you're nervous about. Trouble sleeping is a big sign for anxiety and depression. If you feel like you're starting to isolate yourself from other people, like you want to stay home more, you find yourself saying no to a lot of things that you used to enjoy, that's a big one. Like things that you used to enjoy, you just don't want to do anymore. That's a symptom of depression as well. It's for either eating a lot or not eating at all. I lost 20 pounds in probably 6 weeks because I just couldn't eat. I didn't have any appetite, or I was nauseous. A lot of gastrointestinal issues can be caused by anxiety. So there's a whole lot of things, and those are a lot of physical things. There's also a lot of mental things as well. Like if you have racing thoughts, or the same thought keeps just repeating, you can't get rid of it. Trying to think what some other, I would have crazy thoughts, like scary thoughts.
Yep.
And that really freaks me out because, it's like, whoa, where did that come from? And it's just because of that adrenaline in your body. But you go, oh my gosh, I had this really scary thought of me hurting someone, or, something like that. And you go, could I really do that? And then you start going down that path. And, I kind of had this obsession of Googling. Every symptom I had, I would go on and I would Google it.
No.
Which is a bad thing to do.
Yes.
Bad. Because then you start reading all the worst stories, and I did that with the medication too. Every time they would try to prescribe me any medication, I would go on and Google it.
Yeah.
And I would see every bad side effect. And so, of course, I experienced a lot of those side effects, I'm sure, because I had put them in my head. So
Right.
Those are just a few things that I can think of off the top of my head that might be warning signs for yourself, and if you see, a loved one,
Other people
kind of having those same issues. Yeah, because for me too, when I was going through this, my two daughters started experiencing a lot of those anxiety symptoms because kids kind of take on what they see their parents going through. Yeah, and so that has been something that now we've had to work through with them, but in a more proactive and positive way. So that's been a good thing because I feel like they are much more equipped and knowledgeable than I was about a lot of that stuff. But yeah, it's amazing. Your mind, your body, and your spirit are all so interconnected.
Yeah, we try so hard to separate them and just deal with one thing at a time. And
yes. Yeah, but you really can't, because your thoughts cause what happens in your body, and then what happens in your body causes what your thoughts, and then the spiritual, is all intertwined in that. And so getting a good counselor is really so important. And it took me a couple tries to find one. And I think that's another message for people, is that it does, healing does not happen overnight. This has been now an over 2-year journey for me.
Yep.
And I had to go through a few counselors and a few psychiatrists as well to really find ones that I trusted and I felt like were a good match for me.
Yeah, it's so true. And I know, so I was diagnosed 5 years ago now. And every time I moved, I would put off finding a new counselor because I was terrified it was going to be another, shopping for counselors, and that's exhausting. And it's scary to have to tell your story and your deep, dark secrets and not know how if they're going to be a good fit or not. But when you do find that person you click with, it's the best.
Yeah, it is the best. It is the best.
So how, since coming to terms with struggling with anxiety, have you decided or chosen to live bravely and authentically?
Well, I have had this blog, seekingthespill.com, for a long time. I started it when my girls were little. But this past October, I did a 31-day series. And let me back up just a second. Someone about 6 months ago asked me, when did you know you needed to get help? And I thought, oh my gosh. I said, I can't be quiet about this anymore.
Yeah.
Because if there are people wondering that, and I can share my story and let them see themselves in my story, then that's a calling that I have to be obedient to. And so what I did, I didn't plan to do this. It happened like the night before October 1st.
Okay.
And there's this, 31-day series challenge that a lot of bloggers do in October.
I've done it.
And I told my husband, I said, I think I'm being called to write my story during October. And he goes, everything? It's like, well, yeah, I think I need to be pretty transparent. And so I did. And that was a good just kind of trigger to get some things out there. And what I found is this outpouring of support.
Yes.
Of people who said, gosh, that was me, or I have a family member, thank you for sharing. And so I've continued to write there. And then just a week and a half ago, I stood up in front of 200 women at our church and shared my story out loud for the first time.
Good for you.
And that was it was such a holy moment because I could just feel the love and compassion in that room, and I could just see the walls breaking down. We have just these walls that exist between us as people, and it's hard to share the deep stuff.
Yep.
And so I think the power of telling a story is that people see themselves in your story. And so those walls break down. And that's why Jesus told parables in the Bible, because we relate to stories. And so I would love to keep doing more of that, of the writing and of the speaking, if that's what God called me to. But, I'm just trying to be obedient to the next right thing to do and be transparent. And hopefully, God will use that.
So what would you say to encourage someone in a similar situation? Both someone who is struggling to work through anxiety and depression issues, but also the person who is very proud of their ability to do it all.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Well, the person who is really struggling right now, it's important to know that you are not alone. Anxiety and depressions are so isolating, and you feel like nobody has ever felt like this before. But they have, and there is always hope. Like, even on the worst days, there is always hope. And people would tell me that, and I would say, there's no way I'm ever going to get better.
Mm-hmm.
But just do the next right thing. Don't think about tomorrow if you can help it. Just think about today and what's the next right thing. Maybe the next right thing is trying to eat something. Maybe the next right thing is just getting in the shower.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe the next right thing is calling a doctor. But just take it one day at a time, one moment at a time, if that's what it takes. And read the Serenity Prayer,
Mm-hmm.
the full Serenity Prayer. You know, we often just kind of think about the last bit of that. But it's so important to realize what you have control over and what you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have control over making ourselves better. I tried for a year to read every book and do every meditation and every herb, you know, and it made me worse because when it didn't fix me right away, I felt that failure.
Mm-hmm.
But in the surrender, it was only when I started to surrender and say, okay, this is my life right now. I don't know why this is my life right now, but it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just going to accept it, and I'm just going to live in it, and I'm just going to feel it, because I hadn't let myself feel for so long. And that's a process. But there is always hope, always, always, always hope.
Mm-hmm.
And if you reach out to one person and they don't give you what you need, reach out to another one. Don't stop reaching out to people, because God will put the right people in your path
Mm-hmm.
to help you do the next right thing.
So how about the high achiever?
For the Wonder Woman, the Wonder Woman who, and I was her, and I still want to be her sometimes.
Oh, totally. Every day.
Yes, it's such a struggle. But to the Wonder Woman, God has a plan for you that is bigger and better than anything that you can come up with. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we need to, in my life, I know for a fact that it took this breakdown for me to have a wake-up call. I don't know if every Wonder Woman requires a breakdown, but I was so stubborn that God knew the only way he was going to get through my mask and get through my wall was to shatter me.
Yep.
And so that then I could see his light coming through. So for all you Wonder Women, I hope that you don't need a breakdown. Mm-hmm. You know, if you sense that God is not the most important thing in your life, like you say he is, but you're not experiencing the wonderful peace that comes from living a life close to him, maybe it's time to take a look at that, because God being first in your life is the most important thing. If your job is first in your life, or your ambitions, or even your family, gosh, so many times, I put my kids above God. And I think that's where the breakdown begins. Mm. So it's subtle, it's really subtle, because those are good things to be focused on. Your kids are awesome thing, and your job. Yep. But if they start to become number one in your life, maybe it's time for a self-imposed, yes. Not self-imposed breakdown, but a self-imposed
pause.
Rest.
Yes.
Yeah, a pause, a rest, a time of introspection. And you know what? You don't need to have a breakdown to get a counselor.
Oh, no.
Or a therapist.
Oh, my gosh. That's what I always tell people. I'm like, get one now. Like, get one before you're desperate, because
exactly.
they're just so helpful.
Yeah, if you just feel kind of that tension in your life, maybe it's time to invite someone in and to start telling your story.
Yeah.
That would be so powerful.
Just an outside view, somebody who's not emotionally attached to your life, that can just help you see like what's healthy, what's not healthy, and help you kind of correct things. I feel like those of us who have always struggled with being high achievers can pick each other out of a crowd. And when I see those other women that aren't aware of how how they're trying to be too much. I just want to hug them and tell them that asking for help is not failure. It's actually just wise. Like it's not a symbol of them letting go or failing or not being enough. It's the symbol of them just being wise. And I hope that more women can do that.
That is so true. That is so true. I don't remember the exact quote. I just posted an image of it on my Seeking the Still Facebook page, but it was from Sheila Walsh, and it was something like, the imperfect, broken me is such a better bridge to the world than, the perfect version ever was. Mm. So, and that's like, that's the crux of it, is that we're not doing other women and other people any favors by pretending we have it all together. We're making the issue worse. And it's harder for people to connect with you when you have that kind of aura about you. I had someone come up to me after I spoke, and she said, "Gosh, I didn't know you were going through all this. I just always thought that you were kind of a snob." And I was like, "Oh, goodness." But I could see, I got that a lot because I was always so focused on doing, and that I didn't take time for relationships in my life. And so the more honest we can be with each other and vulnerable, it's hard, but when you do it, gosh, it is so freeing. It's so freeing to sift through your life and go, you know what, my achievements do not determine my worth. Yes. My identity as a child of God determines my worth. And nothing I do and nothing, no way I look or act is more important than just being a child of God and knowing that my family now, I know my family loves me for me and not what I do for them, because for so long I couldn't do anything for them. Mm-hmm. And their love didn't change. It got even stronger, if that's possible. So sometimes in letting go and letting ourselves be a little broken and be vulnerable and saying no and putting up boundaries, we find the life that we've always wanted.
That's so true. Well, thank you so much for being so vulnerable and open about something that causes so many people shame and something that people try really desperately to hide. I know it's going to be an opportunity for people to choose to just be free of that shame.
I hope so. That would be an amazing answer to prayer.
Yes, for sure. So before we go, I have 4 fun questions for you.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
Surprise. The first is, what are you loving right now that you want people to know about?
What am I loving right now that I want people to know about? Okay, this is going to sound crazy, but I have started loving shopping at Goodwill.
Oh, yes, totally.
I get more compliments on my clothes now than ever before, and every time I just chuckle because it's something that I bought at Goodwill.
Yes. Oh, I am right there with you.
Yeah, it's just so great because, once you know your style, you can kind of flip through the stuff pretty quickly.
Yep.
And so that's just been kind of a fun way to update my wardrobe without spending a lot of money. And, I'm loving that right now.
Yeah, when we lived in Las Vegas, we had so many good thrift stores that I love. One of my friends and I would just do that all the time. And then another place we lived didn't have good ones, and that was so sad. But now that we're back in Connecticut, there tend to be good ones, so I need to make that part of my routine again. So awesome.
Yeah, it's just a fun thing to do.
Yeah, totally. What is your favorite meal or snack or other food right now?
Right now, my favorite food is avocado. And that has been kind of something that I've introduced into my diet as just trying to be more healthy.
Yeah.
And my favorite way to eat an avocado is to just cut it up and sprinkle it with a little bit of salt and pepper.
Yeah.
And it is so good. And so I try to have one a day. You can even mix avocados like in the morning smoothie or things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've developed this real love for avocados, which we never had before.
So love them. So good.
It's hard to get them just right, so sometimes you have to put them in a paper bag to ripen them. But yeah, they're awesome. They're like a superfood.
Yeah, definitely. What are you doing to take care of yourself?
I am planning with my husband this summer to run with two of our other couples. We're doing an 82-mile relay race.
Whoa.
And yeah, it sounds scarier than it is, I think, because the legs are split up.
Okay.
So you only
what
run,
is this called?
What
is this crazy thing called?
Oh gosh, I knew you were going to ask me that. I can't remember the name of it. I'll get back to you with it.
Does it start with an R? Is it like the Ragnar?
It's not a Ragnar. It's not a Ragnar. My husband is doing a Ragnar, but this is just more of a fun thing. It's from we have the Katy Trail here in St. Louis, and it runs from the Katy Trail all the way to Herman, Missouri, which is filled with wineries.
Ooh, fun.
So that's kind of your destination.
Yeah, fabulous.
Are the wineries. So you just relay, you just race, and then the other people on your team follow along in a van. Okay. So I'm kind of training for that right now. So
how long is each leg?
It depends. They vary. And so we're having the real strong runners run the hilly long ones. But each leg is like probably about 5 to 6 miles.
Oh, that's not bad.
Each person ends up running maybe about a half marathon, 13 or so miles.
Right.
Which when you split it up isn't too terribly bad.
That's awesome. You can do that. I can support that. That's not totally crazy.
No, it's not. It's very doable.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good for you. And the last question is, what are you doing to be brave?
To be brave, I am really trying to just be obedient to what I hear the Holy Spirit whispering for me to do. And that can be as simple as reaching out to someone who I don't know very well, but I just feel like God has put them on my heart, to bigger things like speaking at that women's event. Mm-hmm. It's hard when people say, well, how do you know God is speaking to you? That's a really hard question to answer. But for me, it's like this still small nudge, and it just keeps popping up and keeps popping up. And in the past, I was too busy to hear the nudge, and so now in this time of seeking the still, I'm really just trying to be brave. And even if it's out of my comfort zone, to just say, you know what, I'm just going to trust God with this. And it's amazing what he does when you go into something with that mindset. And so I guess it's me being brave, but it's really me trusting God to make me brave, because I really don't feel like I can be brave on my own anymore like I thought I used to be. But it's more of a resting in him that makes me brave, if that makes sense.
It's the end of episode 13. It's been 8 weeks of the podcast so far, and I just can't believe how quickly time is flying. I have really enjoyed every moment of it so far. Thank you so much for those of you who have taken the time to rate and review on iTunes. It really does make a huge difference and helps new listeners to find it. You can go to beckylmccoy.com/iTunes to do that. This episode was really convicting for me. As a high achiever, I don't often schedule some time off for myself. So I'm going to take the month of May and get caught up on some personal projects, work on my book proposal, and maybe just sit down and read a book. I'll still be on social media, but there won't be any new podcast episodes or blog posts. I'm looking forward to a little bit of rest, and I'll see you all in June.